While visiting St. Louis to commemorate 1 year since the murder of George Floyd, we caught up with Yamiche Alcindor to talk its significance, how STL plays a role, and why we must honor the past in order to understand the future.
I should tell you, I come to St. Louis probably every year to 2 years because I spent so much time here during the Ferguson uprising in 2014. So in some ways, it's connected to my journalism. And when I think about policing and I think about just what city could we check in on to see kind of how the nation is doing on a whole, St. Louis and Ferguson are always top on my list.
So why is St. Louis so pivotal to telling the story of what has happened in the year after Floyd's murder?
We're looking at St. Louis as in some ways a sort of city that has gone through what Minneapolis is going through and has also seen change, but also has a history of systemic racism and anti-Blackness that is really, really hard to overcome. So we're looking at kind of what are the changes here, what are the changes that people want to see, and how has this city weathered things here, and what can the nation learn from St. Louis?
For Alcindor, a big part of that is revisiting and never forgetting what happened to Mike Brown.
Absolutely. The story of St. Louis is so much the story of America. It's a city where people, there was so much tension along race, where people were often displaced, where African Americans in particular were targeted, terrorized in a lot of ways by white people who didn't want to live next to them, who were threatened by them, who really were paranoid at the idea of a free Black person. So we're looking at the massacre that happened in 1917. We're looking at the displacement of people in different neighborhoods. We're looking at the housing projects and the history there and the demolition. And then we're also looking at present day St. Louis and how all of that history now is culminating in this moment that we're all living through.
But to tell the whole story, we must go back even further to a story we know all too well, one that took place right across the Mississippi River.
Is it vital in order to tell the story of today to revisit those 100 and some odd year old stories?
I think it's vital when you look at what's going on in this country to look at the history of the United States. And that means looking at the history of particular cities, including St. Louis, to really educate ourselves and to inform viewers about what happened. A lot of people maybe didn't know about the 1917 massacre. There's going to be this 100-year massacre anniversary of the Tulsa race riots, but a lot of people don't know what happened in St. Louis.
She's talking about the East St. Louis Race Massacre. It happened in 1917 when more than 100 Black people were killed at the hands of racist white mobs.
So I think it's something for me as a journalist to learn, to take in, and then to share with people, because there are so many things that happened in different cities, in Wilmington, North Carolina, in Miami, Florida, so many places where Black people were frankly terrorized, were victims of domestic terrorism, state-sponsored and sometimes terrorism carried out by police officers at times, carried out by union leaders, and we need to learn that history. We need to know that history. And I would also say it connects to, of course, the founding of our country. We've had this robust conversation about 1619 and the amazing work of my good friend Nicole Hannah-Jones at the New York Times. And I think that in some ways we all need to have 1619 moments. And the 1917 massacre is something that I think is so pivotal to the history and understanding of this city. And it's vital to understand that history, to understand how you get to a Mayor Jones, how you get to a Michael Brown.
For Alcindor, it's with a better understanding of the past that we can make sense of the future.
When you look at racial segregation, when you look at the idea that Black people are some 3 times more likely to live in poverty than white people, that isn't just a coincidence. Black people just didn't decide to live in different neighborhoods and didn't decide to be in places that had worse outcomes, whether it's healthcare or all sorts of other things. When we look at the pandemic, what is it doing? It's exposing, but it's also exploiting the inequalities in St. Louis and across the country. So to really understand the pandemic and really police killings and so many other things, housing and all the other ways that we see systemic racism present itself, you have to know the history.
Learning the history, honoring the past, and telling the whole story. For Living St. Louis, I'm Gabrielle Hayes.